Do you remember, and if you're old enough to remember, back in the day when a new show or movie was big enough, it usually got a tie-in video game. Think about like the Lion King game on the Super Nintendo or Aladdin on the Sega Genesis. Those games were meant to just be a cash in on the current movie that Disney was releasing and wanted you to go play their game. And oftentimes, these games were handed off to developers to quickly turn around and get done as soon as possible. Sometimes the developers were good, sometimes they were not. And through the years, we could expect with a new Disney movie, I mean, even The Little Mermaid had a tie in game somewhere. I believe that was on the Game Boy. But these games were like notoriously like either broken and not fun, hard and not fun, or far too easy and just strictly like meant to get you wanting to buy something else with whatever the current thing was. Some of my, I mean, Aladdin on the SNES, no sir. I mean, that was also an Aladdin base guru, but the Genesis version is the superior version. But oftentimes, some of my favorite games are licensed like tie-in games, and they don't necessarily have to come out like with a thing. If you think about on the Xbox 360, there were 3 Burger King games that are kind of notoriously memed: Sneak King, Big Bumpin', and there was a racing one. I don't remember the name of it because it's not important. Those were very poorly made, but still fun on a weird level kind of game. They were cheap. They actually worked on the original Xbox or the Xbox 360. There was literally no point to those games except to get you like thinking about Burger King. Back on the NES, you had a McDonald's game, McKids, that was very popular. Even retro cartoons that were old by the time like the 16-bit era was thriving. Retro cartoons like the Flintstones and Tom and Jerry had games. They were made to just, again, keep a franchise relevant and try to tap into the gaming audience at that time. And I just have some very fond memories of some of these games. Off the top of my head, one of my favorite like licensed games is McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure on the Sega Genesis. It has some fantastic music. It's made by Treasure, who are the legendary developers behind Gunstar Heroes and Dynamite Headdy. Which Dynamite Headdy, you may not like that game. You may not know these games because they existed at a time where it's like you either had a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis. And if you had both, you were a rich kid. And I don't want to hear. Actually, I do want to hear from you. But if you had both, I mean, odds are you only got like one game every so often on it anyway. It's not like now where games are a lot cheaper just across the board. Thanks to indie devs, digital sales, Humble Bundle. Like there's so many ways to get games now that it's not a big deal. But like getting a new game back then, renting a game from Blockbuster, those are things that like you don't experience anymore because things have obviously progressed. But with that is kind of the death of licensed games, sort of, and I'll get to that in a moment. But there was a period of time where, with the 360 era, we had some movie tie-in games. The Spider-Man games. Spider-Man 3 had a movie tie-in on the 360 and the PS3. And may have not been the best Spider-Man movie tie-in game, but I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. In fact, it's the one I remember of the 3. Even though everybody liked Spider-Man 2, I played through Spider-Man 3 and I enjoyed it. But in any case, the movie tie-in games became less and less. And it's because, in part, game development got more and more complicated. Budgets grew, AAA experiences cost a lot more. But being able to quickly turn around a game in, 8 months to a year, which is often like being generous, often what the time frame was to get these games put out. They came out with a less than fun game. I think about when Iron Man came out and Iron Man 2. I really wanted to play a good Iron Man game on the Xbox, and what we got just wasn't very fun. It had some neat visuals, but overall wasn't. It just wasn't a fun game, and it's sad. But eventually, we see the decline of those games into the Xbox One, PS4 era of gaming, and I think it's just because people weren't buying them. I mean, you could expect them to be relatively terrible, but you you wouldn't even give it a shot anymore because it's like, hey, they're charging $60 for this, and I can go get either some older games or a really good multiplayer game that I'll keep playing for the same price, and so you had to weigh that a little bit. I feel like as an adult now with adult money buying games, I'm like, well, am I going to have time to play through this? Do I want to chance it on a bad game? And so, we have a lot more reviews and things available. But just as time has gone on, licensed gaming to tie in like with a movie release or a series, release just hasn't been as big. There have been things, but what I'm really enjoying right now is kind of a resurgence in licensed gaming where the focus is the games. And I'm thinking about Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is a fantastic tie-in. And then we've even got re-releases of the classic games, like we have a re-release of Aladdin and Lion King. There was re-releases of DuckTales, which was a good game just on its own. Hard game, but a good game. You even have where, like, as those classic games are getting ported, you have indie studios that are able to take on some of these licenses and make a better game just on its own. Case in point, Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, fantastic game, fantastic franchise, but they had a legacy to stand on with the classic arcade Ninja Turtle beat 'em ups, and they just took that and ran with it and made something new and special that you really like. And so I think it's kind of cool to see smaller studios able to take that, make something newer with it instead of a poorly coded or roughly coded and released rushed game that nobody's going to enjoy because it's too hard, because it's broken, or they just ramp the difficulty up because they expect you to rent it from Blockbuster and not actually buy it, right? Nobody's doing that anymore. Everybody's just buying games that are cheap, or games are just, generally cheaper, especially when they're from an indie studio and you don't have a publisher that's like, hey, you have to do it this way or you can't sell your game, and we have so many spin-offs of things now. Like, I think about like the Pokemon franchise. Spin-off games have always been a part of it, but now there's so many more because they can just license it out to different developers. But I don't want to get on that. I'm specifically talking about like movie tie-ins, and I really hope that we start seeing more small studios able to take, like, let's get a new game that's like Super Star Wars or Super Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. Like, those games were really fun. They were really hard. They were really fun. They looked good. They played very appropriate for the time, but they tied in so well by letting you experience, Star Wars in a 2D setting, but with like, hey, you got to be Luke Skywalker and wield a lightsaber. What games that are story driven now let you, like, that are based on something? Like, Star Wars is all spin-off games now. Like, none of them really are mainline experiences. Now I think the best Star Wars game you're gonna get is a spin-off or an original story, which is fine. Respawn did a great job with the Jedi games. Like, those are fantastic games. But again, those are licensed games that were specifically designed to be a game. It wasn't like, hey, you got to hurry up and release this before the movie comes out. Or you have to target the movie release date, which has had like a 5-year head start because we started shooting and filming and editing, way ahead of when we decided we wanted like a good tie-in game. Now, like, the budgets and timing are so big that even if you do a AAA Respawn level game, you've got to plan it, and it can't be tied in to some relevant movie release or book release or what have you. And so I just really respect that, and I just wanted to rant about that for a little while. It's a trend I like, because some of my favorite games back in the day, even if they were hard and I was terrible at them, are licensed games based on movies and series. And I hope we get to see more of that just going forward, especially from indie studios that are more than willing and able, if they're just given the freedom, the creative freedom, to just take a treasured property and expand on it in a way that gamers will love. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitch, we're gonna go play some Zelda. Be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I don't know if I don't know how this is working. This is my first attempt at a kind of retro discussion, but it's a topic I really enjoyed. So you guys let me know what you think, and we'll chat again on the next one. See ya.